Hello and welcome to the Ivy League Sisters podcast, where you're invited into the world of high-achieving women who earned that coveted Ivy League degree and now are here to get real and honest about the pressures and expectations that come with claiming this achievement. I'm Lauren Baluchian, and I'm the founder of Ivy League Sisters, a mentorship community where intellectually curious and slightly rebellious women band together to support each other through the personal and professional seasons of life. In this podcast, we peel back the layers of perfection to reveal the authentic, often messy, and always inspiring stories of women who have been where you are. So whether you're an Ivy League graduate, a high achiever in any field, or simply someone striving to live a more authentic life, the Ivy League Sisters podcast is a place where you can realize you're not alone. And if you're new here, like and follow this podcast so you don't miss out on the latest episodes. I hope you enjoy the conversations. Okay, so Jen, I just want to say again, thank you for being here. For those who are listening, I've got Jennifer Diehl with me this morning, and Jennifer is a member of the Ivy League Sisters community. And I know that she graduated from Cornell, but I'm going to let Jen talk a little bit about your history. Just give us some background. Where did you grow up? Where did you study other than Cornell? What did you study? And what is your career trajectory and your family path? What's it been like for you?
Absolutely. First of all, thanks so much for having me. I'm really excited to chat with you today. So I grew up in Rockland County, New York, just a little bit north of the city. And I went to Cornell. I was actually pre-med and changed my major to apparel design. My entire childhood, I was sort of going down that path, and I thought that was what I wanted to do with my life. And I'm actually not, I can't pinpoint what made me change direction, but I never really identified as an artist, but I sort of embraced that part of myself while I was in college and realized this is a path that I want to pursue. So I changed my major to textile and apparel design with a minor in costume design. And I graduated in 2003. Moved down to the city. And at that time, it was nearly impossible to find a job in fashion. So I ended up working at Starbucks and taking side gigs doing costume design. So I did a few off-Broadway shows, some regional theater, a few small films. Eventually, I found a job with a designer. I worked for Tracy Reese, and that was an incredible experience. I got to... Our designs were shown in New York Fashion Week, got to travel with her to Paris and London, and it was an incredible experience as such a young designer. After that, I actually, my next job was Abercrombie. They relocated me to Columbus, Ohio, which is where I currently live. I worked there for about 3.5 years and then worked for Bath and Body Works. So I was doing the apparel design thing, and then I changed to accessories and gift sets. So I've always been designing in one way or another, but it's just sort of been in different sectors of the market. And in 2010, I launched my own company called Ritzy Rose. And that was... it was basically, I launched it with my former husband, Jason, and we essentially we did everything for a wedding. And so when we started, we basically set up an Etsy shop and just started creating things and just seeing what stuck. One of the things that really took off were brooch bouquets. And that is a bridal bouquet made out of vintage costume jewelry. It was something that I did for a few years, but what was important about that is Miranda Lambert actually hired me to create her bouquet when she married Blake Shelton in 2011. So that really helped the business take off.
Okay, for those who can't see, my jaw just dropped. Like 10 things that Jen has just said has made my jaw drop. But so like that's so fascinating. You made this
you had this idea for making a bouquet out of jewelry, and then Miranda Lambert buys one.
Yeah.
Okay, so keep going. I just had to name the fact that my jaw just dropped.
Yeah, it was really wild. I was driving to my job at Bath and Body Works at the time, and I got a phone call from Bev Lambert, and she was like, "Hi, I'm Miranda's mom," and yeah, it all unfolded from there. And at that point, I had a 5-year plan to scale the business and hopefully leave my corporate job. But there was amazing press following her wedding, and so that accelerated things. And within 10 or 11 months, I was able to sort of retire from the corporate world and do my own thing. And throughout the years, we pivoted a little bit, especially with the pandemic. We shifted more into paper goods, designing. So essentially, my job was more of like a graphic design. So again, still designing, but just in a slightly different way. And at the end of last year, I actually exited the company. It's in great hands with Jason, and I was really ready for a new adventure. So once again, we're in a time where it's very, very difficult to find a job. So I've been applying to a bunch of things, but I've taken this opportunity to actually step back into my original passion, which is costuming and just theater and film. So I've been focusing on those sorts of jobs. And I actually just got a position as head of the costume shop at French Woods Camp in upstate New York. So I'm super excited about that. I'm going to be working with, I have 12 to 14 costumers in the shop. Plus, I'll get to teach campers that are interested in learning costume design. And we put on over 60 productions through the summer. So this costume shop has over 40,000 costumes in it, and I'm so excited. Because like I'm such a theater kid, but backstage, like I'm not like, I don't want to be on stage. I just want to be around it and in it. So it's the perfect position for me to transition back into that world.
Oh my gosh. Okay, so we're all over here just celebrating. I can see the look on your face. You're so excited about it. It makes me excited about it. It seems like such a perfect fit for you, and like it's kind of come full circle.
Yeah.
And there's already so much in your story that I want to ask about, but I also want to ask so just there's so much in your story, but I also want to ask, you're a mom, right?
Yeah.
So in addition to having a career and running a business, and it sounds like you were also, and we're going to go back to this, you were launched your business while you were still working your corporate job, and you have 2 children, correct?
Yeah.
And so how old are they? Talk a little bit about mom life.
Yeah, so I have 2 sons. They are 12 and 8. And that has been wild and amazing. And it's funny, my 12-year-old was just in the school play last night, and this morning he was like, "Mom, can you help me get my makeup off?" And like something like, I don't have daughters, and I never thought, but I was like, "Oh, I'm so happy right now. This is amazing." He was in Treasure Island, so he had this like pirate makeup all over his face still, a little guy liner. But yeah, they are the light of my life. I love them so much. They're cuties. And I think I've convinced them both to actually come to theater camp with me. So that's going to be fun to get to have them there with me when I'm in New York for the summer. But yeah, that was an interesting factor also in that with my former business partner / co-parent, we were running the business together and co-parenting and all of that. So yeah, that's one great thing, that now that we've shifted into no longer being business partners, we're able to be even better co-parents to these kiddos. We have a great setup. Their dad lives right around the corner, and it was a super amicable separation. So yeah, we've shifted into like this next phase of our family life, and everything is just kind of fit into place.
That is fantastic. I mean, that's a beautiful story, and I'm so glad, because lots of co-parents don't necessarily have that amicable working relationship. So I'm glad for you and your children, certainly, that's the case. I want to talk, though. I want to go back into your story, because this is what always happens. Someone tells their story, and I'm like, hang on, I got to go back to this moment or that moment. So I want to go back to this moment. where you're pre-med and then you switched to fashion and apparel design. And was that just, and you kind of glossed over it, was that just sort of an organic process? Did you have any family pressure? What do you remember about that decision?
There was no family pressure. And within my family, there's this dichotomy between artists and scientists. Everyone, for the most part, falls into one camp or the other. And I think the reason I was going into medicine, if I really unpack that, my mom has been an RN for her career. And so I remember reading her nursing, like the New York State board exam. I can't remember the wording of it, but her textbook, I remember reading that over and over when I was like 12 and just trying to memorize it. And of course I probably watched ER and I thought I wanted to be in that world. But no, everyone was so supportive of me. And they have been the whole way. I've been really, really lucky in that, they just really want me to be happy and yeah.
Oh, that is fantastic. So what a blessing. What a blessing. Because look at the path that you've had. And so I also want to talk about, so you graduate Cornell and it's really hard to get a job. And so you're working Starbucks, right? Like the classic post-college gig, right? I'm going to be a barista. And you're doing side gigs. How long was that period for you?
That's a year or two.
A year or two.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So just still kind of finding your footing and finding your way. And that's fantastic. And so what year was it that you graduated from Cornell, if you don't mind my asking?
2003.
Okay. So it was 2003. And then by 2010, you kind of really hit your stride. You're in your footing in terms of your career. You've relocated to Ohio. You've got a great employer. Mm-hmm. And what made you, because we have a lot of women in this community who are interested in launching their own business. So I think this is where the story can be really valuable for other people. What made you want to launch your own business while you had like this super, super secure, checking all the boxes kind of corporate job? Like what drove you to be like, I'm going to start an Etsy shop? Sounds like a good idea. Like, where did that come from?
I always knew that I wanted to work for myself. The things that I liked about the corporate environment were the ability to travel, the interactions that I had with other people, and learning the full spectrum of the production process. But I didn't love the day-to-day. And I really wanted the freedom to be more creative. Even being a designer, a senior designer, none of those roles were as creative as you would think, or as I wanted them to be. And so I was able to step back and be my own boss and create what I wanted. And that really was more satisfying to me. And I did it while I still had that job. And we were, trying to play like a long game. Like as I said, I had no plan to leave within a year. I really thought that I would just grow this slowly while I continued at Bath and Body Works, but things accelerated so quickly. After the Miranda Lambert wedding, I had enough clients on the books to last like a full year or two. And so I had a great runway, and it felt secure enough for me to step away. And a couple years later, we had our first son, and Jason and I had said, like, actually, I'm trying to think of the timing. I may have mixed up that timing, but it would have been so much scarier to leave the corporate world once we had a kid, just because of all of the extra responsibilities and the extra, expenses and things like that. But because we'd already made that leap, and then that was our life, and we'd adjusted to, the first few years having a lower income and just kind of being scrappy. We had our kid because that was the situation, and we just went from there. So yeah, things like the timeline kind of worked out in a way that made sense. Yeah.
That's perfect. So what I'm hearing you say is I had a lot of clarity about my corporate job, like what I liked and what I didn't. Mm-hmm. And what I'm hearing you say is, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but what I heard you say was, I knew what I didn't like. So I went to go create something that would meet the need that where my job wasn't meeting that need. And that's really critical. And what I'm also loving about your story is you set the intention of this is going to be a slow runway. I'm going to do these two things. I've got my corporate job. This is going to be a slow runway. We're going to see where it goes. And then, of course, it kind of blows up. I also want to talk about something that you mentioned when you said, like, oh, we were really used to being scrappy, and talk a little bit more about scrappy and the value of scrappy, because it's not something I think that we talk about enough, particularly for entrepreneurs. And talk about scrappy in terms of your personal financial life, your business. Talk about like what scrappy looked like for you. Give a few examples if you can.
Yeah. And it's weird because throughout my career, I've shifted in and out of that mindset, but it looked like never buying coffee out. And if I would, you know, meet up with someone and they would have different spending habits than I did, I was just like, I can't believe you just spent $7 on coffee. And then meanwhile, you know, other points in my life, I'm like, okay, I'll have two, or, you know, I have two Starbucks a day. No longer, I'm back to scrappy. But it really was just shifting my mindset away from thinking that I had just endless funds and just having to prioritize and kind of putting blinders on to everything else. And once I shifted that mindset, I didn't feel like I needed to go shopping all the time and get new clothes. And yeah, I just sort of became a little more resourceful. And once I made the sacrifices, they didn't really feel like sacrifices.
Mm-hmm. What I'm hearing you say, when someone says, oh, I put blinders on, or to me, that says what that person is doing is they're setting an intention and then they're living with that intention. It's about it's about making an intentional choice about where money and time and energy are going to go. And I think once you've made that intention, then it's easy. If something doesn't fit with that intention, then it's just easy. It just drops by the wayside, and it doesn't feel, at least in the times that I've experienced this, doesn't feel like a big sacrifice. It's like, oh, that doesn't fit with my plan, and that's it.
Exactly. The goal was greater than whatever it was that I wanted at the moment.
Yeah. I also want to talk about one of your superpowers, and I don't know if you've ever named this, I think, is pivoting. Like, that is absolutely one of your superpowers. Like, I'm watching you, like, oh, I took a job as a Starbucks barista, and then I did this, and then I did that. Like, pivoting is one of your superpowers. And I want to talk a little bit about, you started your own business. It's 2010, and it's a wedding business, and weddings are in person. And then the pandemic comes. And lots of people aren't having in-person weddings, or they're delaying weddings, or they're having Zoom weddings. Like, it's just, the world got a little bit different. So talk a little bit about what that was like for you as an entrepreneur and how you pivoted and what you did.
Absolutely. It was a really scary time. 80% of weddings were canceled. And as a result, our sales were down 80% year over year. And we had to let some people go and cut back on some hours. And at this point, we were no longer doing the bouquets. We had kind of pivoted out of that already, just watching the market trends. I did that for about 7 or 8 years and then stopped accepting clients in, I think, 2016 or 2017. And that was mainly because each piece was custom, and it took so much time compared to the other items that I was developing at the same time, where I was able to create them and then scale them without, it was a different business model. So in that process, we were still in the wedding space, but one of the things that we did a lot, it was the paper wedding signs. So like reserved chair signs and table signs and things like that. And also little banners for like a ring bearer or flower girl to carry. So still, we were in the wedding space, so those sales had dropped. So during the pandemic, we really looked at what people needed and what they didn't need. And we actually started designing a lot of greeting cards because we were like, people are home, they feel distant, they want to feel connected. And that is what got us through. It ended up replacing, by the end of the year, it ended up replacing the sales that we had lost. And to this day, that is a majority of what the sales are. Now, weddings are back, and so it kind of has like balanced out. But that was a really, really good move in that I don't know if Ritzy Rose would still be in business if we hadn't been able to go in that direction.
If you hadn't pivoted. Yeah, I think that's really important. Again, what I'm hearing you say is I looked around, saw what was working, what wasn't working, which is, I think, part of being scrappy, that's part of that whole mentality and part of that skill set. And then saying, okay, what am I going to do to make this work? And what I'm not hearing you say is, oh, the pandemic came, I gave up and I went back to a corporate job.
Yeah.
It just feels like for you that wasn't going to be authentic. And so you did what was authentic for you, which I think is really, really admirable. Can you talk, and for those of you who are listening to this and can't see this, I love talking to Jen because she's in this room, which is a 3-season room in her house. And it's like this creative workshop. And so behind her, there's like, you can see fabrics and there's a mannequin and I don't know, there's something with sequins. And like, I just want to be in that space and go play every time the few times that I've seen this space. But I want to talk about creativity for you. Where does it come from? How do you define creativity? And what do you do? Oh, I really want to know this. When you get stuck creatively, what do you do to get unstuck? But start first with like what your creative process is and what gets your juices flowing. Start with that.
That's a really hard question to answer. It is so deeply ingrained in me that I can't be any other way. It's just like when I have a day off, I'm at my sewing machine and like it's what I choose to do for fun. So it's not work and it's really just not even a hobby. It's a passion that I get to do all the time. And if I'm lucky, I get paid for it. And yeah, I surround myself with other rooms in my house are just as colorful and like I have this entire wall of this like pink and gold like watercolor basically that's like an entire painting on the wall. So yeah, I just surround myself with color and textures and things that inspire me. I don't really follow rules. I like to break rules. I like to know what I like to make myself aware of, what like traditional rules or design principles would be, but I'd love to break them. And yeah, I think it just really is who I am. And it's impossible to separate me from the creativity. I don't know. That sounds weird, but like, it's just like too deeply part of my identity, which is a good thing and a bad thing at times. And that goes back to like comparing yourself to others. Like I have some thoughts on that in terms of it being such a big part of my identity. But yeah.
So do you ever, well, I guess you sort of answered this, but would it be fair to say, gosh, I don't ever really feel stuck creatively?
When I do, no, that's definitely fair to say. And sometimes I do. But I have ADHD. And so I also have a lot of things going on at all times. So when I get stuck, a lot of times I'll just set that project aside and work on something else. And then the answer or the direction usually comes to me from getting some distance and then coming back to it.
Okay, so what I love about what I'm hearing you say is I don't get stuck in being stuck, which is so great. So what I'm hearing you saying is I get stuck on this thing and I just go do something else. And I feel like what you're saying is I just trust that the answer or the solution or whatever, like I'll be ready for it in a day or two, a week, whatever. But what I'm hearing you say is I don't get stuck in being stuck. Yeah. And what I think a lot of us who are champion overthinkers, and I'm raising my hand here, I can get stuck in the fact that I'm stuck. And I think what your process is really beautiful is you don't overthink that and just go do something else, which I think
I definitely overthink a lot of things in my life. But when it comes to creativity, I do sort of trust the process. Yeah.
Yeah. Talk about the things that you do overthink. Because I think it's really interesting because sometimes in areas of our life, we can be big overthinkers and in other parts, we're really not. So for you and your creativity, you're not an overthinker, but talk about the places where you are an overthinker and how that shows up.
Yeah. Well, in the process over the last few months, while I was trying to find my next job, that was an area where I did begin to overthink and doubt myself and my skills and my experience, my talent, and all of that, because I was applying to jobs as if it was my job, and I was spending so much time on it and nothing was coming from it. So that was tricky. And I almost had to like, what's that saying? Oh, Delulu is the Salulu. I had to remain a little bit delusional in order to believe that something would manifest, because just in the face of all of the rejections, every day there would be a rejection email that, I didn't get this job or another job. So I think it's impossible to not overthink that and wonder, am I doing the wrong thing? Should I go back to corporate? Should I go back to Starbucks? Like, you know, but I really did try to stay, yeah, just delusional enough to kind of like remove myself from the current job market and know that something was going to happen. Because otherwise, what was I going to do? Give up on applying? And I don't know, then nothing would have happened. And if my mindset had shifted to an overly negative one, like there were moments of doubt and negativity, but if I had shifted to just like to complete negativity, then I don't believe that this role would have come to me. And I don't believe that anything really, would have ended up materializing. So that was important.
And how long have you been? I want to ask this question because this will be relevant to members in the community who are job searching or who are in a pivot. How long has this period been that you've been either job hunting or looking for the next thing or thinking about? How long has this been?
It was about 5.5 months, which I actually read that 5.7 months is the national average right now for someone to find a new position. So I was panicking until I read that figure, but it was a long 5.5 months.
Yeah, it can be a long period. And I think sometimes it can be really discouraging and it's challenging and it's easy to get in over our heads and start overthinking. And I think it's really beautiful that you have managed, and I think we all indulge in some of that, but it feels like you were able to stay out of that. And so this role came along and I want to talk about this role. So how did you find this role?
Yeah, I was actually listening to a podcast with Zach Braff and Jessica Kirsten. She's one of my favorite comedians, and we all, of course, know Zach Braff. And they were talking about how he got his start in acting, and he mentioned Stage Door Manor, which is a different acting camp in upstate New York. And I had seen that camp advertising on some of the job boards, and I looked over it. I was like, I'm not going to go work at a camp. Like it didn't click for me, but it did as soon as he said that, because he talked about how just the other like famous actors who had gone there, and with the proximity to New York, there are directors and producers that, go up there to recruit. So I applied to that camp, and but then I remembered the French Woods, the camp that I got the position at. That is another performing arts camp in upstate New York. My siblings all went there. So like in the early 2000s. So I'm really familiar with it. I've been there. Like I've seen their performances. They have circus. Like I saw my brother in the circus there. And so I applied to both of these camps. And I interviewed with both of them on the same day. I got an offer really, really quickly from French Woods, and it felt like the right fit from start to finish. So I accepted that, and
I love that. What an organic process. Like I was listening to a podcast, I heard this one thing about this one camp, so I went there, applied there, and then I applied at this other place. I mean, what an organic process. That's so beautiful. So what will this be like for you? So you're currently in Ohio, which is where your home is.
Mhm.
So will you be there just during the summer and then you'll come back? What will this be like?
Yeah, so I'm in residence May 31st through September 1st. So I'm going to be gone just over 13 weeks. And this might be too much information. I'm bringing my cats. So they were like, yes, that's great. We'll put you in the costume shop apartment. So I have my own little apartment in the back of the costume shop with me and my cats all summer. Because I have a co-parent for my kids, but not for my cats. So I was like, what will I do with them? And what else? yeah, and then I'm really, really excited. Luckily, I will get to have my kids there for a few weeks, so I don't have to be away from them for the summer because that was the hardest part for me. Um, and um, and then what else? Yeah, and so really, ideally the goal is to obviously it's going to be an incredible experience and awesome to have to add all of these shows and experience that I'm getting to my resume and my portfolio. But beyond that, the connections that I'm going to make while I'm there are just so many important people in theater, people who send their kids there, really notable people, and the campers that go on to do incredible things in the industry. So it's just talent all around, and I love being around talented people. And so, yeah, I'm so excited for it.
What a great opportunity. I mean, you'll be there, you'll be doing work that you love. You're going to have 12 or 14 customers underneath you. And what a great, and just to be surrounded by all that creativity and energy and all those connections. I mean, what a great thing. And so that starts on May 1st, May through September. So what do you have any plan for, like, oh, you're going to come home, in the fall, and what happens for you, or what do you anticipate happening for you? And this will probably all change, but in your head right now, what do you anticipate doing from like fall through spring?
That is a great question. I, let me know if you know of any opportunities. I don't know yet. I'm still applying to things. Obviously, I'm not available for the summer now, but I am still putting feelers out for, the short time before and then for anything after September. But the nature of my business is great because if I get on a film, that could be a 2 to 3 month contract.
Mm-hmm.
So hopefully I'll be able to piece together work so that I can do things throughout the year. And then if it works out well this summer, then hopefully I'll go back next summer.
Okay, go ahead. I'm so excited because there's something that you're doing that I have to name, and it's something that a lot of us are not good at. What I hear you saying is, I'm really okay with all this. There's a lot of uncertainty, and I'm sort of okay with it in my belly. And the other thing that I hear you saying, which I think is super cool, is I don't know what's going to happen, but I see you like quilting together a career. It's not one thing. It's not one corporate job with a title and the salary is this, and I go and where it's predictable. I see you quilting together 2, 3, 4 different things. I don't know what's going to happen next. I'm sure I'm going to meet people. And I love that you're embracing that. And I think that's so exciting. You're embracing the unknown, and I'm sure the uncertainty is sometimes a little unsettling because we're all human.
Mm-hmm.
But there is this degree of self-confidence and comfort both in yourself and kind of then and in the universe, like it'll work out one way or another.
Yeah, I mean, I have been, I don't know if it's luck or timing or hard work. It's probably a combination of everything, but amazing opportunities have happened throughout my life, and I've been able to do incredible things. So I'm kind of leaning on that, not leaning on that, but I'm using that to kind of soothe those uneasy feelings when they come up, knowing that everything has always worked out, and just having a little bit of confidence, a little bit of faith in the universe, and in myself. But yeah, it is hard at moments, but overall, I think it's the excitement that I have for the possibilities that really just like keeps me moving forward.
Oh, this is I'm excited to see what happens for you next. I'm just so excited, particularly with this camp where there's all kinds of energy and creative and accomplished people. And I want to talk for a second about accomplished because I'm going to name this. So in preparation for these podcast interviews, I always look at someone's bio and I try to find a resume and I'll check Instagram posts, just get to learn a little bit more about my subject. And I have learned that I cannot, and I talked to you about this before we started, I have learned that I cannot do that until about an hour or two before the interview. Otherwise, I get completely overwhelmed and I get completely in my head and I get completely intimidated. And I will just say, I looked up your resume before we started. And I got completely intimidated because I see all of these accomplishments. I stopped counting at 30 when it came to the number of publications and television shows that your work has been, I was like, I'm stopping at 30 because I'm already, and these are really big publications. This is Martha Stewart and like Southern Living and Good Morning America and like really, really big stuff. So now you're going to be in this environment where there's a lot of really talented people. And I want to transition a little bit into this issue of comparison. Like, does that show up for you? What happens? Like, when I deal with comparison, I get this kind of ick in my belly where I just feel a little bit less than, no matter who I'm comparing myself to, whether it's someone at the gym or a former colleague, from business school. How does comparison show up for you as a creative? Like, what's that like?
So I think that when it comes to the experience this summer, so for example, I'm going to be surrounded by really, really talented, successful people, whether it's kids with raw talent who are going places or directors, producers, writers that have done amazing things in their career, and they're now teaching the kids, or we're doing their shows, so maybe they're coming to watch the show. The people they interact with, I think that I do try to sort of stay in my lane, because it's sort of apples to oranges, and while I may want to achieve like similar levels of success in my career, we have different paths to get there. So like I always say, I don't want to be on stage. I just want to make really talented people look and feel amazing. I want to dress them so that they look awesome and all of that. I don't want to, I don't want to be in the spotlight. But when it comes to comparing myself to other creators and other designers who are more similar to myself, that definitely comes up a lot on social media. And so a few things. I have to limit my just how much I consume Instagram and TikTok, which is really tricky because I'm creating content. And in order to do that and stay relevant and know what's going on, I need to kind of have a finger on the pulse. So I can't completely shut it out and ignore it. But I find that when I am scrolling too much, I get in this almost like FOMO like mindset of like, everyone is doing all of these incredible things. Look at what they've achieved. At these other designers that are just like me. But they're creating Chapel Rowan's outfit for the Grammys. Like, why didn't I get to do that? I should have been working harder in that direction or whatever. And there was actually a really great quote. Dan Levy did a video recently. Eugene Levy's son from Schitt's Creek and a whole bunch of things. It was so good. I took notes on it. And I'm going to kind of paraphrase, but he said that social media removes the process from creativity, which is so true. So essentially, so the people that you love and follow and admire, you're seeing their output and their finished product, with some exceptions. But for the most part, you're seeing the finished product. And even if they show you part of the process, it's sped up into 60 seconds. So it looks easy. It might have taken 30 hours for them to create it, but you see it in 60 seconds. So you don't see the challenges of the process. And that's intimidating because it gives you the illusion that that what other people make comes easier to them than it does to you. And I thought that was really, really important to speak to, because even though I know how long it can take to create a handmade couture garment, I still see someone else, share a video of their process, and I'm like, I should be making more. I'm not doing enough. So that's one area where I just need to be really mindful, because I do tend to get caught up from time to time in comparison in that arena.
Well, I think it's a completely normal. I think it's a very normal human emotion, human reaction, human habit. And I do think there is something about social media that somehow it has made it easier for us to engage in comparison. It's just so easy to pop open Facebook. I was doing it this morning. I was sitting in my bed, drinking my coffee and I popped open Facebook and I'm scrolling through reels, and all of a sudden I feel like I'm not as great as a horsewoman. I'm not as, my farm is a mess. Like, all of a sudden, and then I'm like, oh, I'm just going to sit here in bed and drink more coffee because clearly I can't ever be as polished or as great. And then I put the phone down for 2 minutes. I was like, oh Lord, get out of your head. Get out of bed, put on your overalls and get to work. But I think it's really important to name how comparison shows up and how it feels. And I'm really curious about this question because I was thinking about for you as a creative, do you ever look at other people's content? I'm guessing that you do for inspiration. And where is that fine line between consuming content for inspiration and comparison? And I'm guessing based on your previous answer, when comparison is starting to show up, and it sounds like you're really good about putting on a limit. But do you look at other people's content for inspiration, and then does it ever turn into comparison?
So I do look for inspiration sometimes, definitely. And a lot of times it's just to kind of get my start on a project, because maybe I have a very rough idea of what I want to do, but I need something more concrete just to begin. And a lot of times it's not so much Instagram and TikTok, that's more Pinterest, or like fashion history or things like that. But sometimes that is tricky, because even saying it makes me, obviously, like I use that as a little spark of inspiration, and then my thing ends up looking completely different than where I started. But even saying that out loud makes me think, like, makes me almost question my own internal creativity if I have to sometimes look to others. But luckily I've worked corporate jobs long enough to know that for every design company, there's a term called patterning, and that's when we go out and buy samples from other people and then bring it in. You have to change it at least 10% to, like, for legal purposes, but that runs rampant. I actually do it so much less now that I'm not working for a corporation. That was one of the things I didn't love about jobs that I've had in the past, because we would buy samples from we would buy retail items from other designers, put them in our sample library, and then just create variations from those that fit into our budget and brand. So everyone does it to some degree. And the important thing is that once I sit down to sketch or cut or sew, that then my internal, whatever that is, it takes over.
So your own internal process takes over once you actually, once my vulgarity, once the ass is in the chair and it's time to do the work, it's all you.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's really important. Can you talk for a minute about, I don't have children, but I have friends who do. And sometimes I want to talk about comparison outside of your professional life and your creative life. Does comparison ever show up for you as a parent?
I'm not on Facebook anymore. So
oh my gosh, super, like that alone, like what a great tool. Okay, so
yeah.
that's good to know.
Because I'm thinking, like, I don't think that it really does. And even on Instagram, I have a personal account, but when I started 5 months ago, started looking for a job and kind of designing under my own name, I set up a separate account. So because I didn't really like my algorithm anyway, because I had a lot of personal friends there and just things that maybe weren't great for my mental health, but my new algorithm is all design, and so it doesn't really give me opportunities to compare myself as a mom or to compare my kids to other kids. I do remember, during the years when my kids were younger and I was on Facebook, I do think that would come up a lot with birthday parties and, photos and all of the things that I could be doing. And yeah, I think I feel a lot healthier not exposing myself to that, because it's impossible to not let it, like, it's insidious and it just kind of eats away at you.
What I'm hearing you say is this is another place where you put blinders on.
Yes, yeah.
And so it doesn't show up.
Yeah.
So that's yet another, like I've seen that in your story a couple of times where you put some blinders on, you set in the case of being scrappy, it was, my intention is I'm going to make this work. That's my intention. So I put blinders on, and anything that doesn't fit with that intention just falls to the wayside. And in terms of this question about comparison as it shows up maybe in your personal life, and particularly as a parent, because I think that shows up for a lot of women. Am I doing enough for my kids? Is what I'm doing big enough, right enough? Am I getting them enough tutors? Like, it's always this question of enough. What I'm hearing you say is, well, I've just turned off the noise.
Yeah, that's a really good way to put it.
Yeah, that alone is really, really important. So we're coming up on an hour, but I always like to leave room. Is there anything that you want to share before I ask the lightning questions, which are super fun and easy? Don't overthink them. But before I go into those lightning questions, is there anything else that you want to share with the community or talk about, or anything that feels? Because actually, I have one more thing.
Okay.
I have one more thing. So when I have talked to you before, you talked about your BHAG, and I want you to tell the community what it is, what that stands for, because I think it's such a great acronym.
Cool. Yeah. So BHAG, it's a term that I learned in entrepreneurial course that I took, and it stands for Big, Hairy, Audacious Goal. And it is your goal that is just so crazy that you're almost hesitant to share with a lot of people, because for some people it feels cringe. Maybe it's so unrealistic that people are afraid that others will doubt them, or say that's never going to happen. I am just delusional enough to freely share my BHAG with others. And so for me, I want to be the next costume designer for the Chapel Rowans and Taylor Swifts and Beyonce's, and just amazing, powerful, strong female musicians that are kicking butt on stage all over the world. And so it falls in line with my costume design, being in the entertainment world, but that's kind of the pinnacle of that. And I will add that being costume designer for like the Wicked movie, which clearly has already happened, and I'm sure that Wicked 2 is already well into production, but that is another BHAG, because I cried through that movie because the costumes were so beautiful. But those are the hairy goals.
I love that. For those who can't see my face, I'm just grinning ear to ear, and I love the idea of everybody having a BHAG, like this big, hairy, audacious goal that is so crazy and bold that you kind of almost don't even want to talk about it because everybody else might think you're crazy.
Yeah, it's definitely supposed to be just unrealistic enough, but you could achieve it.
It could happen. It has to happen for someone, right? It has to happen for someone. Someone has to design costumes for Beyonce. Yes.
Exactly.
I love that. Love that. Love that. Okay. So we always end the podcast with a handful of lightning questions, and don't overthink them. They're really, and take your time, but there's really, really 3 questions. The first is, what is the biggest thorn on your rose bush right now? Would it be perfectionism, people pleasing, or imposter syndrome?
Maybe a little bit of imposter syndrome, because because I'm working towards my BHAG. And so I always have to ask myself, can I? But then I remind myself, yes, I can. But yeah, it's there.
Love that. Okay. What is one lie you still tell yourself? Love that.
I've spent a lot of the last 5 years really moving towards authenticity wherever I can, and like stripping away the things that don't work. So I think a few years ago, I would have, here's one, again, maybe TMI. I lied to myself that I was straight my whole life, and I came out when I was 39. I realized I'm not straight. So, but yeah, I'm no longer lying to myself about that. And it's not that I lied to myself, but I was not aware. It was kind of hidden behind a lot of layers of societal conditioning and just, not being aware of it.
Okay, so that was about 5 years ago?
Yeah. And that's why my marriage ended. So that is also a reason that we are so amicable, and that it was a fairly peaceful separation.
Oh my gosh, but I love that. That's so beautiful. That process of becoming more honest with yourself and that self-acceptance. Like it comes through when someone talks to you. It just comes through. It just shines. I love that. Love that. Thank you so much for sharing today, sharing your story, your process. There is so much here. I think for so many people, I think we all learn from stories. And I think there's so much that we can learn from one another. I'm walking away with number one, like pivoting by itself can be a superpower. And I think you're really good at it. Number two, I think you're really, really good at being comfortable with uncertainty and sort of trusting in the world and trusting in the process and trusting that, whatever's going to happen organically, it's going to happen. I think one of the things that you're really good at also, and I want to call this out because it's come up a couple times in this interview, is setting blinders where you need to set blinders. And I think that alone is, if whoever's listening, if you take nothing away from this interview, take away the value of putting on blinders where you need to put on blinders. And I think of that as sort of taking like a mental diet and saying, I'm not going to consume that, or I'm not going to do that because it doesn't fit with my intention. And that alone is really, really beautiful. So thank you so much for sharing your story. And again, every time I see you on camera, I want to be in that room playing and making and having you teach me things. Like, I think you're such a beautiful, bright soul. And I want to say thank you for taking the time and thank you for being part of the community.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me.
I hope you enjoyed the conversation. If you'd like to be in contact with our community, you can find us on Instagram and LinkedIn at Ivy League Sisters, or visit our website at ivyleaguesisters.com. And if you found this conversation valuable, I invite you to share it with another woman, another friend, another loved one, because it's through our sharing that we inspire one another and deepen our connections. Until next time, remember, you're not alone. We are in this crazy thing called life together.